Langston, Manny, welcome back to the Report, the Women's Basketball Podcast, episode number 50. We got there, halfway to 100. It's crazy to think, y'all. I think it honestly deserves a round of applause as well as the theme music. Big jam-packed episode for you guys in this one. We're going to recap the week. We're going to talk about some very long winning streaks, some winning streaks that just ended literally last night. We'll also talk about some very key games going into the weekend and then some quick hit notes around the country with a lot of things looking like certain teams are going to be getting ready to clinch an opening round. Some of them clinching their divisions and a few other things. Some conferences are actually finishing up their conference play this weekend. We're going to start with our Around the Rim recap. That's where we're going to start today. So we're going to start with Around the Rim. You look around. These are some of the games that I touched on earlier this week in our first episode, on our Monday episode. Receiving votes, Oregon Tech takes down receiving votes Southern Oregon in a really, really good game. Tatum Shormarback had 26 points and 10 rebounds. Columbia of South Carolina beat Johnson in the AAC. Micaiah Thompson had 14 points and 10 assists. Bethel upsets number 18, Spring Arbor. Isabella Scales had 18 and 10 in that one. Very impressive win for Bethel of Indiana. And then Faulkner beat number 18, William Carey. Kyra, Scotland, 26 points. LSUA beat Texas A&M San Antonio. LSUA out-rebounded the Jags 41-27. And then North American hands LSU Shreveport their first Red River loss of the season. Even though the Stallions had 30 turnovers, they're still able to come out with the victory. So again, some of the quick hit games around the country from this past week. A lot to dive into just from that, but we're not going to be able to dive into all of those. Biggest thing I kind of want to note is even though LSU Shreveport did lose in their first Red River game of the season, because so did the Jags, nothing really changes in terms of the race for the Red River Conference regular season championship. It still looks to be in favor of LSU Shreveport, and I'll get into more of that on our Monday episode after a few more weekend games are played. Before we get into the rest of this episode, and it's going to be a jam-packed episode, just hit on the recap for the week. So I want to talk about a specific team that is red hot right now. Talk about the polls reaction, obviously, that came out this past Wednesday. And then a few quick hits. The main bulk of this episode is going to be on winning streak and some of the winning streaks that right now have sustained for the past few games. Going into the weekend, going into the last 2 weeks of the regular season. We're going to touch on the team that I wanted to highlight real quick. Probably the hottest team right now in the country, the Lindsey Wilson Blue Raiders. Lindsey Wilson right now is on a 6-game winning streak. 5 of those games have come against Mid-South teams. The Mid-South teams in question: number 4, Campbellsville. Receiving votes, Cumberland of Tennessee. Receiving votes, Georgetown. Number 21 now, Cumberland of Kentucky. And then number 2, Freed-Hardeman as of last night. I don't know if there is a more impressive 6-game winning streak than the one the Blue Raiders are on right now. And when we talk about possibilities of, I'm getting a lot of flashbacks to Bethel of last year. I'm getting a lot of flashbacks because right now they have Bethel lined up tomorrow. Funny enough, and that's going to be a really interesting game. They're right now averaging 73.8 points per game against Mid-South opponents, and then 62.8 opponents' points per games in those Mid-South games as well. So they're doing on both sides of the ball. And when I went to the stat sheet, obviously you got a Maddow Tisdale. She's doing what she normally does. Taylor Guess. They have the normal people that you would assume are playing well. Like, it's not, but then no one's really jumping out. No one's out here averaging a crazy number of points. It's their season averages, but they are continuing to just elevate their play, and it's hard to put a reasoning behind it. It's hard to put a name to it, but they seem to have just entered another level. Obviously, they've now gone up to number 13 in the rankings as of the polls this past weekend, which I kind of predicted because of their winning streak beforehand. And now you beat Freed-Hardeman. I would not be surprised if, depending on how the rest of the regular season goes, and you talk about, the polls are going to come out in the middle of the week, so it's kind of hard to tell, but they could maybe sneak into the top 10, y'all. Like, they really could. But no, this team is red hot right now. I am getting a lot of Bethel vibes from last year, where Bethel was the 5th seed. The only difference was Bethel kind of stumbling into the conference tournament, but at the same time, not really, because they kind of had turned a little bit of a corner towards the end of the season. Lindsey Wilson hasn't really stumbled this year. It's more so just continue to do well, and then they just entered another level, and now we're seeing them compete with some of the big dogs. Mind you, out of all these games, I think the Freed-Hardeman game is the most impressive one. I watched the ending of that game live. It was at Freed-Hardeman, y'all. Like, it was at Freed-Hardeman. They had chances. Freed-Hardeman did have a chance to tie the game. I thought it was a clean look by Jenna Satterley. I don't think if you're a Lions fan, you would have wanted anybody else taking that shot in that moment. She came off the ball screen in transition. Coach Abby did not call a timeout, understandably so. Let's push. She just missed, but I do think it was some really good basketball being played there. I do think the Lindsey Wilson had some timely free throws down the stretch. Again, she got to close out the game. They did just that. Freed-Hardeman gave themselves some cracks at it. I will say from the Freed-Hardeman side of things, again, I didn't watch the full game, but in the about 5 minutes or so that I did watch, a lot of turnovers. It felt like every time I looked to the screen, Freed-Hardeman had turned the ball over. Lindsey Wilson was going the other way. Lindsey wasn't the score out of all of them, but when they kind of took their 4-point lead and went into the rest of the game on the media timeout, it was also a turnover from Freed-Hardeman. So I do think that was the biggest Achilles heel for the Lions in this one. Great game that I think both teams could have easily won, but I truly do believe that Lindsey Wilson right now is on another level. And if they ride this momentum into the Mid-South tournament and past the Mid-South tournament, because they are going to be a national tournament team, we are going to look back at this 6-game winning streak, 5 games against the conference, and saying this is when it all kind of started turning around, and we got to give them the attention. Now, do I think this team is going to be a high seed on the high seed line? Probably not. But at the same time, you've gotten some interesting wins. I'm not going to lie to you. Obviously, the best win is the Freed-Hardeman game. If you beat Bethel, now we're talking about some serious movements of seeds and whatnot moving forward, because this Lindsey Wilson team is no joke, y'all. They're no joke, and I think they need to get their shine, because they did have some uphill battles earlier this season. You know, you dropped some games you weren't supposed to. They lost to Georgia Gwinnett earlier this season. They gotten some upsets by a couple teams, but at the same time now, they've turned it, and it's not about, you know, championships aren't won in November and in November and December. They're won in February and in March. So we'll see how the Blue Raiders continue to move forward in this winning streak to end the season. Now we're going to head over to our polls reaction. Again, polls came out. The last regular season polls came out this past Wednesday. Few quick hits, nothing crazy. And then we'll get into the winning streaks that I wanted to talk about. For me, I've been, you know, depending on how the polls go, I've been on the poll side a lot this year, you know, saying that I think they hit on the nail. A few things here and there, whatever, but I've called out a few of them being really, really good. I don't think this one was a great poll. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't think it was a great poll. I do think Bethel and Freed-Hardeman should have shared. I do think they should have shared the number 2 spot. I just feel like I understand why they didn't. I get it. Bethel lost to Georgetown. Freed-Hardeman only lost to Bethel. I get that. But I do feel like you have to value head-to-head matchups at some point. Like at some degree, they got to value a little bit. So I'm glad that Bethel didn't drop, because again, they got upset by receiving votes Georgetown. But at the same time, I feel like you didn't penalize, or you didn't benefit Bethel by beating Freed-Hardeman. That's a tough game. And that was a bounce-back game, too. That's the other part. It was at Freed-Hardeman. Like, there's just too much. I feel like you got to share number 2. That's just my personal opinion. I think Kansas should have dropped below St. Francis. I don't think that the Cougars did anything to deserve to dropping. Even though it was only 1 spot, they're at 7 now. They were at 6. I don't think they did anything to drop. If anything, I feel like Campbellsville should have dropped lower, because, and I get Dakota State moving up. I get that. But I don't think St. Francis should have dropped. I think Campbellsville should have dropped below St. Francis, and then we have a situation to talk about here. I think St. Francis stays at number 6. If you want to leave them at 6, leave them at 6. That's fine. But then we got to move Campbellsville to 7. I do believe it's time. I don't think that the Tigers have done enough to stay top 5. Top 10, I'm fine with that. I'm cool with that. I think that they are a top 10 team in the country, but I don't think St. Francis is not a top 6 team. They're not even. I think they're a top 5 team right now in the country, for being honest. So that's the first thing that I have to say about the top 25. Again, I'm glad Lindsey Wilson got their skyrocket. Kind of called that one. I believe I said top 15. Did I think 13? No, but I'm glad. I was just confident they would be a little above 15. I didn't know what number they would end up at, because we were at 24. They jumped almost 10 spots. They jumped over 10 spots. So it says a lot to the committee for getting that one right. So I'm glad to see that one for the Blue Raiders. Eastern Oregon and Evangel, like I mentioned in the Monday episode, they just benefited from other teams having really, really rough weekends. I literally said in the video, if the Evangel moves up, it's not Evangel and Eastern Oregon. If they move up, it's not because like they did anything great. They just did what they were supposed to do, and the one hiccup was not a horrible hiccup compared to some of these other teams that, you're on losing streaks or you're dropping multiple games to unranked teams or receiving both teams or whatever the case, your teams below you in the ranking. So that's kind of what I saw from there. So again, I called that. I knew that some people got to move up. There's so many people that I felt like from the last polls were going to move down, guaranteed. Someone's got to move up. So I just think Evangeline and Eastern Oregon benefited from timing, and sometimes that's what it comes down to with these type of things. I didn't see Briar Cliff falling out. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I kind of flipped. I kind of called it a flip. I thought Briar Cliff would stay in, but lower, and Friends would be the one that falls out. I do think now when you look back at what happened since the polls, I do think that probably should have been what happened with Friends dropping their most recent game to Sterling. But I just didn't see Briar Cliff falling out. I didn't think Briar Cliff needed to fall out. I'll be honest with you guys. I was a little shocked by that one. I did call the other two dropouts, Corbin and St. Francis. If you want to know why, go ahead and check the previous episode on that one. But I knew that those two teams were going to fall out for sure. I called Langston and Loyola getting in on those two dropping out. Didn't see Carroll. Not mad at it, though. I'm pretty sure the selection group or the Raiders kind of looked at the conference side of things, because obviously at this point in the year, everybody's pretty much in conference. So when you look at it, I'm looking at teams that they were kind of jockeying around with. I think in the end, Carroll and the Frontier has a little bit more to say than some of the other conferences that were being on that bubble. So I'm not mad at it. I just didn't see Carroll getting it. I believe I said in the episode, they would have been one of my teams that should be in had they not gotten upset by Montana Western, I believe it was. That was the only reason that it might not even been Montana Western, but they got upset by a team that was unranked, and I'm pretty sure it was the Bulldogs, so that's why I didn't have them in. But they were going to be at the top of the receiving votes picture anyway, so them sliding in is not a big, oh my God, what happened? It's just kind of, I get it. Now, on the receiving sides of things, there's a lot of questions to be had here, y'all. I'm not going to lie to y'all. Starting with, I'm very surprised Cummins, Tennessee, and Taylor are still in. I called USAO getting out. I knew that. Semi-called Faulkner, although now I'm sure that they should have kept Faulkner in after Faulkner beat number 18 William Carey and pretty much has given Loyola a straight shot to the first auto bid of the Southern States. I'm sorry, but if you're coming to Tennessee, you're on a losing streak. You have to come out. You have to come out. You're already at the bottom of the swing votes. I just don't see, and I get it. The Mid-South is one of the toughest conferences, is the toughest conference in the NAIA. If you put Cumberland, Tennessee, in any other conference, they're probably a playoff team. They're probably not a playoff team. They are a playoff team. They're probably even fighting for a number one seed conference championship regular season for some of these conferences, but they're not. They're in the Mid-South, so it's kind of, you got to go with it what it is. Same thing with Taylor. Taylor is not a bad team. Do I think they're going to be a national tournament team? It's tough right now, but at the beginning of the year they were looking like one, and now you're on a losing streak in the Crossroads. I believe it's up to 4 or 5 games right now. So you have to penalize some of these teams, and they might as well get back in. They might get back in on the final official polls of the season, but we got to get there first. I do believe that they should have probably fallen out, and I would have taken at least one of those two teams out before Faulkner. I think Faulkner's done enough to stay in if you're going to keep those other two teams in, and that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion, but I do feel like some of these teams should have gotten in. For example, Bethel of Indiana, I think they called out the rankings. They don't get in after upsetting some very impressive teams in the Crossroads, and what do? They go out and upset another team in the Crossroads in Spring Arbor. I don't think, like, they are screaming loud. The rankings aren't looking at them. I get that. Do I expect them to be a national tournament team without a conference championship? No, I don't think they get in. They're probably a bubble out team right now. Now, if they continue to do what they're doing, they could be a bubble in team. Don't get me wrong. They could be a bid stealer. They are a real bid stealer contender right now. But I do think it kind of makes sense. Or it doesn't make sense, I should say, and why they weren't in. I had them as one of my teams in because they had done enough before that Wednesday game. That Wednesday game came and went, and they have definitely done enough now. They should have been in the receiving votes picture, even if it's just 1 or 2 votes. I think they should have been in. Speaking of which, I do think Indiana Western should have moved up. I don't know. I mean, they're on the cusp, and I get why they were there, kind of, but I think they should have moved up after beating St. Francis again this season. I understand they've lost some not great games too, but I think they should have moved up, in my opinion. I'm happy to see Benedictine from Kansas was in. I think that they've done enough. I'm happy to see Grandview got back in. I just think Northwestern should have been in. I think they should have been in. And to be honest with you, I would have taken Northwestern probably over Grandview, because when you're looking at the totality of their season, right, or the past 2 weeks, I should say, for Northwestern, they have really impressive wins over some solid GPAC teams, including Briarcliff at Briarcliff. And then when you look at Bethel, who is the other Bethel of Kansas, not Bethel of Indiana. I already talked about the Pilots. When you look at Bethel of Kansas, they have a longer winning streak. They have a very impressive resume as well. They upset Evangel as well. I think Bethel of Kansas and Benedictine Bethel of Kansas and Northwestern should have been one of those last two teams in. I think I would have taken both of those teams over Grandview, one of those teams over Grandview, I should say. But I would give the nod to Northwestern because I feel like their upset win was at home. So therefore, it holds a little bit more weight in my book. Again, Bethel beating Evangel was a really impressive game. I talked about it on our fast break and on our KCAC coverage. It's a great win, but it was at home. And at the end of the day, you're splitting hairs here, obviously, but it matters. It does matter. Obviously, when you look at was your game on the road, was your game at home, it's going to matter when you talk about selection committee because Bethel's another team on the bubble, could be in, could be out. I'd probably lean out right now. I actually probably lean in, Bethel in. I really do think so. But right now we're talking about it. Northwestern won on the road at Briarcliff. I think they should have been the last spot in over Grandview and over Bethel. I understand Grandview. Would I have done with it? No, but I do think the Vikings have done enough to be receiving votes right now at this time of the season. Those are kind of my reactions. Those are my quick notes on the polls. Not a great polls, I'm not going to lie to you guys, but some of the things that were questionable can be explained, and as long as they can be explained, it's all I ever cared about. It's all I ever cared about. Now, the bulk of this episode. Winning streaks. I had a list of winning streaks. We obviously posted it on our Scouting Report Volume 6 earlier this week. One of the longest winning streak of the season has now ended. Well, up to this point has now ended. That was LSU Shreveport. They had 17 in a row. Could not get to number 18 thanks to North American. So the longest winning streak now of the season belongs to a team who has 17 in a row. It is Loyola. I believe they have tied a record for the longest winning streak in program history now at 17. Now, these stats that I have, they were before that game. So understand that. I will pull up the game, though, so that I can update you guys on how that game went. But talking about the 16 games beforehand, when you look at it, this winning streak started back in November of the 25th of November. So 2025 was when this winning streak started, pretty much at the beginning of the year. They played Dillard and won that game. Some notable wins since that game, since the start of the winning streak, they beat UT Southern, they beat Faulkner, and they beat William Carey. As of today, meaning before last night's game against, I believe it was Mobile, this team has done an impressive job at just imposing their will. You know, they've beaten one ranked team and one receiving votes team. That being, again, updated as of the recent polls. They beat number 18, William Carey, and they beat receiving votes UT Southern. I think at the time they beat Loyola, that Loyola beat William Carey, they're actually receiving votes. But again, as of today, they've technically beaten a ranked team and a receiving votes team. We look at the stats. This team is averaging 78.3 points per game. They're holding opponents at 54.6 opponents' points per game. They're shooting 45.8% from the field and 32% from a three-point line. And when you throw in the numbers from that last night's game against Mobile, they put up 88, so that average went up. They held them to 44, so that average went down. And then we look at the scoring side of things. They shot 55.1% from the field and 44% from a three-point line. So those numbers went up as well. They have been on an absolute tear for the past, what is that, November, talking about November, December, January, 3 months, almost 4 months now. They've been one of the best teams in the country. They are the hottest team in the country in terms of winning streaks. They have 17 now in a row. It ties a program record, like I mentioned. And when we look at the players that have kind of propelled them to this level, and for those who don't know, welcome to the pack. We have talked about at length their big three. One of the rare big three stories of them developing together for the past 3 years now. I believe this is going to be the senior year for Alyssa Odell, Denia Thornton, and Caitlin Travis. I believe this is their final year. They have been one of the best big threes for the past 4 years now in the NAIA. Again, from a development standpoint, they've developed all the way through from all freshman teams, all conference players now. Like one of these three leagues is going to be player of the year. So this is just impressive development side, and from a recruitment standpoint, understanding what they could have grown into and being able to play off of each other. When you look at the individual scoring numbers for each of these three ladies, Odell's putting up 17.6 points per game. She's had 6 double-doubles, including 2 20-10 games and then 1 30-10 game. So she's been absolutely amazing on the rebound side of things as well as a scoring standpoint. Then NAIA Thornton, she's put up 15.4 points per game. She's had 2 double-doubles. One of them was a 20-10 game. And then Caitlin Travis, only 10 points per game, but she is still one of the more explosive scoring options on this team where, yeah, she's putting up 10 a night in the past few games, but on the season, she's the third leading scorer on the team for a reason, and she's closer to 15 points per game than the last few games show, but she's also had some very impressive offensive nights in these 17 games. Just so happens that Odell and Thornton have a majority of the touches right now, but you can't forget about Travis because she will go off and have a 20-point game. She'll have a 25-point game. That just shows the luxury that they have to be able to have 3 flat-out bucket getters on this team. When you put it all together, this 3-headed monster is putting up 43.5 points per game. Out of the 78, again, this is before taking into account last night, out of the 78.3 points per game on this streak. That means that over 50% of the offense is coming from these 3 ladies. That is an absolutely unreal stat. And when we look at last night, Odell had 25 points with 5 rebounds. Thornton had a 12.9. Travis had an off night with only 3 points. But again, you see 2 out of those 3 ladies on any given night can go and be the bulk of the offense. They have been, on the offense side of things, they have been the reason that this offense has elevated to another level in terms of efficiency, in terms of scoring. They are peaking at the right time. Now, can they sustain it? We will see. Obviously, they will be a national tournament team. They do not need the conference championship to clinch a spot. They need the number 1 seed to clinch a spot. They'll get an at-large bid. But I do think they're going to get the number 1 seed. They'll get the conference championship regular season title. Again, we'll talk a little more about that on Monday's episode. But this Wolfpack team has been very, very impressive. They're peaking at the right time, like I said, and I don't see them slowing down. They might drop a game or 2, and I do have 2 games here on the schedule to kind of keep an eye on moving forward. But even if they do lose this winning streak, I think it isn't as important as some of these other teams, just because, in my opinion, they are in the driver's seat. Yes, I know William Carey's still in their conference. Yes, I know Faulkner's still in their conference. I know UT Southern's still in their conference. I know there are some teams still in this conference that can compete with the Wolfpack. But as it stands today, I would say the Wolfpack are the favorites in the Southern States to run the gauntlet and take both the regular season and conference championship. I do believe that is what's going to end up happening. This Wolfpack team is very, very, very impressive, and I think their winning streak, it matters, but it doesn't matter as much as some of these other teams I'm going to get into in a moment here. The 2 key games that I have lined up for them, Faulkner tomorrow and then UT Southern next Saturday. Because of the win that Faulkner had against William Carey, I'm almost positive that no later than the 19th would be when Loyola can clinch a number 1 seed. We'll see. I got to go back to my notes. I got to go back to kind of run through it. But there is a world where Loyola is going to clinch very, very soon. So keep an eye on that. Depending on what happens tomorrow in the Faulkner game could determine a few other things. The next team that I wanted to talk about in terms of winning streaks, this team has 16 games in a row. The number 1 team in the country, the 2-time defending national champions, the Dordt Defenders. Haven't talked about them a lot recently, since the beginning of the year, really, since their last loss, which was before the winning streak started. The winning streak started on December 17th against Dakota Wesleyan. Since then, few notable teams they've beaten. Dakota Wesleyan, like I mentioned, Concordia twice, Mid-American Nazarene, Benedictine, Kansas, Hastings, Briarcliff. As of today, with the most recent polls that came out, they have beaten 3 ranked teams and 3 receiving votes teams. The ranked teams are number 11 Concordia, number 10 Mid-American Nazarene, and number 9 Dakota Wesleyan. The receiving votes teams, Briarcliff, Hastings, Benedictine. Now, again, at the time, I think Briarcliff was even ranked as well, so you could have thrown in a 4th team in there. Hastings and Benedictine have never been ranked this year, but you kind of see that they play some quality opponents, some non-conference games as well as some conference games. Look at the stats. The Defenders are putting up, in the past 16 games, 89.6 points per game. They are flirting with 90 points per game. They have been one of the most efficient offenses all season and one of the toughest conferences in the country that is extended for 16 games. Not just conference games, but we're talking about non-conference games as well. And they're holding opponents to 56.6 points per game. So if we round up, that is 90 and 60. That is a 40-point differential in the past 16 games almost for this team. They're scoring 49.7% from the field and 41.2% from the three-point line. I don't know if you can point me to a better offense for a longer stretch of time in the past 16 games. I don't think you can. This sample size is massive. The sample size is impressive. And it goes to show you that complacency, satisfied with winning, is not a thing right now for the defenders. Their quest for a three-peat, completely alive, completely realistic. I haven't even gotten to think about if I would pick them to do that right now, but they got to be on the short list. They got to be on the short list because you can't talk about a team talking about peaking at the right time. Offensively speaking here, you can't peak any better than Dordt is right now. You can't. The only team that has had a better winning streak than them is Loyola. And even still, when we talk about the scoring, Loyola is averaging as a team 78.3 points per game. The Dordt defenders are at 89.6. They're almost 20 points better than what Loyola is doing. You can't compare apples and oranges. Loyola's doing a great job, but defenders offensively are just on another level right now. They are probably the best offense right now in the country, talking about the last 16 games and talking about right now as of when you guys are watching this on February 13th. Very, very impressive for them to be doing this. Again, you can always talk about going into a season, are they going to get bored with winning? Is it going to be hard to do it again? The mental fatigue, the physical fatigue, playing late, playing a full calendar year. I mean, we start in October. They've, for the past 2 years, haven't stopped playing until the end of March for the past 2 years now. You know what I'm saying? You have less of an off season. You got to come back and do it again in the middle of the summer for workouts and summer workouts or whatever the case is. So it's a drag. Winning is not fun. Winning is boring and it's hard at the same time. So to see that the defenders have done this, and I think the most important part of this whole winning streak, they started it after their loss to Don the game before Dakota Wesleyan. And I mentioned before, I don't know if I said it in that video that we did on like the coverage of that game or if we said it some other time, but I know I mentioned watch this game that Tigers lost. Watch that game be the reason they go on a just tear. Because it woke them up. It woke them up. It made them realize, hey, wait, we are not just the 100 in the G-Pack. We are the 100 in the country. Teams want to be us. Everybody in the country wants to be who the defenders are. Not just two-time national champion. No. They want to be in that spot. They want to be a team that for the past season has never gone below the number 2, maybe number 3 ranking in the top 25. They want to be a team that is looked at where you know who they are, you know what they do, and what it's going to be like every single night. A team that, even on their worst night, they are still going to be able to beat you because they have done it at the highest level for long periods of time for the past 2 years. This Defenders team has peaked at the right time, and from an offensive standpoint, I don't know if I would pick any other team in the country right now to be able to go blow for blow with them. Talking about key players, obviously, you have Macy Sievers. I'm not going to talk about her first. I'm going to talk about Gracie Schohoven. 23.6 points per game, 2 double-doubles, both of them being 2010 games in these past 16 games. The girl's averaging almost 24, 25 points per game. She has been the best offensive player for the Defenders in the past 16 games. It has not been Macy. Now, speaking of Macy, that doesn't mean she hasn't been the best player. Gracie, I believe, has been the best offensive player, scoring aspects, offensive source, walking offensive, whatever you want to talk about. She's been the best. But Macy has been the best player, in my opinion. Why? 15 points per game, 2 triple-doubles, 6 double-doubles in the past 16 games. That means half of the games she's played, she has had either a triple-double or a double-double. For the record, there have been games where she has had double-figure rebounds, but not points but not rebounds, assists. Like, she's had those type of games, though. So don't get it twisted. She's probably averaging double figures at least once every game. At least. That's the type of number she's putting up. And again, she's just a different type of player. Gracie's going to go out there and get you buckets. But when you look at what Macy does, she's more of facilitating, more of what does the team need? Fingerprints are everywhere. You know she's been on this court because she leaves so many different aspects. I do want to give her a shout out because she did win. I'm blanking on the name of the award, but one of the highest recognition in terms of the NAIA for a student athlete. So I want to give Macy her flowers for that. Now, we talk about key games left on the Dordt Defenders schedule. The real only game, if the Defenders win tomorrow, and I do believe they will, it sets up a very important kind of regular season winner-take-all championship game in a way against Dakota Wesleyan on the 18th. because right now Dakota Wesleyan is, I believe, half game back of the defenders for second in the GPAC. If they win that game, they will clinch. Obviously, then the Tigers cannot catch them. But there's a world where Dakota Wesleyan does not win that. Dakota Wesleyan wins that game. I do believe that. I think they're going to be one of the next few teams that we talk about in terms of winning streak. So I do think it is a possibility for the Tigers to upset the defenders. And I say upset. Really, I don't think it would be an upset. I think the Tigers are a very, very good team that can do that, and we'll get more into them in a moment here. But the Dordt defenders offensively have been one of the best teams in the country, and it has led to a 16-game winning streak. And I do believe it's going to continue. Maybe they're not going to average 90 points almost for the rest of the season, but their efficiency and the way they're scoring and the defense that's going along with the offense is going to continue for the rest of the season into the postseason as they look for that third straight national championship. Langston, the Lions out of the Sooner Athletic. A little bit of a scare last night against College of the Ozarks, but they were able to come out of it. I don't know. It was an overtime game. I watched the fourth quarter and overtime of that game. Great execution by Langston going into that one, or especially that ATO. Ooh, the fake ball screen into the down screen off the pick and roll from the ball side. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Great shooting. Just awesome game. Awesome game overall. And again, I only watched 15 minutes of it, but I wish I would have watched the whole 40. I really did. Well, 45 really. The winning streak started on December 11th. They now sit at 15 with that win last night. That winning streak started against Wayland Baptist. Some notable wins. They've beaten College of the Ozarks twice now, MACU and USAO. As of today, they've technically only beaten one team in the receiving votes side of things. That's MACU. They haven't beaten any ranked teams. Technically, USAO was receiving votes during the winning streak, but no longer there, obviously. Talking about stats, for them, I think it's more of a little bit defense. Their scoring is at 71.4 points per game, but they're off. But their defense has put opponents in locks, 53.8 opponents' points per game. They're shooting the ball 41% from the field and almost 30% from the three-point line. That's why I say I don't think it's been necessarily the offense has helped them. I think it's defense. I think defense is what's really gotten them to this point of being one of the best teams in the country. And obviously, I do think it's about time that they were going to be a top 25 team. Obviously, I'm glad they got the number that they did get. I think it's completely realistic. I think it's funny because talking about key players, Janiah Tucker, she's never lost this year. I was looking back at the stats and I was looking at the numbers and I looked at her and she had 14 games played when I looked over because I started these numbers before they played last night. Obviously, I've updated it since then. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, she's played in 14 games. So I look back to see when her first game was. And it was on December 11th against Wayland Baptist. So she has, and I'm not going to say that she's been the reason that they're winning. I know that's not the case. But I find it funny that she has been the catalyst for this winning streak. Her numbers are exactly what they're on the stat sheet. It makes my life easy. She's put up 17 points per game. She's shooting the ball 48.8% from the field, 34.4% from the three-point line. She's been the best player for the past 15 games now. And pulling up last night's game against College of the Ozarks, it doesn't change. This team now sits at 23-2 on the season. And we look at the box score. This was at College of the Ozarks, by the way. Tucker finished with 15 points, 4 rebounds. She had assists as well. She shot 7 to 17. So not a great shooting night. I will shout out Anaria Hunter, 25 points, 5 steals, 5 rebounds, 3 of 5 from the three-point line, 8 of 12 from the three-point line. And I'm pretty sure she was the one who hit the tying 3 that sent it into overtime, as well as a big 3 in overtime to kind of give the Lions some breathing room. But Janiah Tucker has played in only 15 games, the last 15 games, and has helped her team win all 15 games. So I think she's got to be credited with a little bit of it. Again, I'm not saying she's the main reason, but she's a pretty good help when you're putting up almost 20 points a night on pretty efficient shooting from the field and from the three-point line. Talking about key games that are left here, because they were able to squeak by against College of the Ozarks, we are on a collision course between Nelson and Langston for a regular season finale that has regular season conference championship implications. Number 1, number 2 teams in the country, in the SAC, they will meet on the final day of the regular season. If both teams continue to win into that game, winner takes all on that one. Langston wins. They're the number 1 seed. They get the conference championship regular season title. And if Nelson wins, I am pretty sure it forces a tiebreaker. And then we start going to the tiebreaker situations because I'm 90% sure, looking at Nelson's schedule, or looking at Langston's schedule, the last time these two teams played, scrolling up, Langston won. So if Nelson wins, tiebreaker, you move on from there. I do think Langston will win. I do have them winning. And again, I'll get more into all these regular season stuff on Monday's episode. But that is my other team that has been on a little bit of a winning streak, 15 games in a row for the Lions. Now looking at the Tigers of Dakota Wesleyan, and then we're going to throw out some teams I do want to give light to in terms of winning streaks because they have some impressive winning streaks. Pretty much every team that has, for the most part, every team that has 10-plus games. But the last team we're going to kind of deep dive into, Dakota Wesleyan. 15-game winning streak. It started back on December 13th against College of St. Mary. Notable wins, Providence, Campbellsville, Concordia, Briarcliff, and Hastings. As of today, they've beaten 2 ranked teams and 2 receiving votes teams. The 2 ranked teams are number 5 Campbellsville and number 11 Concordia. And the 2 receiving votes teams are Briarcliff and Hastings. Like I mentioned before, Briarcliff was ranked at the time, not anymore. Look at the stats, 83.9 points per game, 51.6 opponents' points per game, 48% from the field, 37% from the three-point line. This team has done everything. This is why I say that matchup against Dordt might be game of the year contention because talk about 2 teams very similar. I mean, yes, the Dordt defenders are closer to 90 than Dakota Wesleyan is, but Dakota Wesleyan's closer to 50 on the opponent's points per game than Dordt is. So it's a great matchup of really good offenses with really good defenses, some of the best players in the country, some of the best coaches in the country as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. And the key, I know I'm jumping ahead to the key game here, obviously, because I already talked about it. The key part about this game, it's at Dakota Wesleyan. It's not at Dordt, right? So when you look at it like from that standpoint, there is a world where the Tigers can do it. Obviously, you get the automatic bid. You alleviate some pressure from the regular season. I do think these will be the 2 teams that get the auto bid because Dakota Wesleyan will finish second in the conference. Dordt will finish first, vice versa. We were talking about before for the GPAC. If the conference and regular season champions are the same, number 2 seed, I believe, is the one that gets the auto bid. Again, got to refresh my memory on that, and we'll do that on Monday. But these 2 teams will be in the national tournament. These 2 teams are Red Banner contenders. These 2 teams are going to be pretty high in terms of seed lines moving into the postseason. This game is going to tell a lot. I think when you're talking about splitting hairs, 2 teams that could be 2 seeds, maybe 1 seeds, depending on how the rest of the season plays out. We'll see. Because if they play again, which is a completely possibility, they could play 3 times this year. Whoever gets to the season series, so to speak, going into the national tournament is going to probably get a higher seed than the other team. So, and if you give Dordt a 2 seed, you kind of have to give Dakota Wesleyan at least a 2 seed. If not, maybe even talk about a 1 seed. We'll have to go. I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's a lot of implications on this game coming up here. And there's a world where the Tigers do win it. We're talking about players. Avery Broughton, 15 points per game, 2 double-doubles in the past 15 games. And then Emma Yost, 13 points per game. But she's on a 3-game streak of at least 10 points in those past 3 games. So she's kind of turned a little bit of a corner for the back end of this winning streak. Again, very good scoring standpoint. And when you look at it, these are the two players who have led the offense for the Tigers. And you can even see in their numbers, 15 points per game, 13 points per game. Not that it's bad. So a lot of players in the country would love to average that for a couple games, let alone for 15 games. But it shows the defense side of things. It shows that this is a defense-driven run here. If you force me to pick, I think the defenders on Dort's side, it's offensive-driven streak, not a defense-driven. Not saying that they're not playing defense, but I do think it's more of an offensive thing. So when these 2 teams match up and they collide in a couple of days here, what will last? I'm always going to go defender. I'm always going to go defense. So maybe I'm giving away my pick. We'll see. But it's going to be a lot of fun watching these 2 teams play for not just GPAC supremacy, but bragging rights. Talking about 2 of the teams that going into the season, we're talking about, hey, it's going to be the Tigers or the defenders. Yeah, Concordia had their throw in there. Briarcliff is on the mix. I get all that. But when it comes down to it, Dakota Wesleyan, Dordt, who wants it more? We will see in a couple days here. A few teams before we wrap it up here that I wanted to highlight. UT Southern and Reinhardt, both with 12-game winning streaks. Both have, for Reinhardt, they got a good chance of clinching the AAC coming up here in a couple of days. And for UT Southern, they have a chance of moving up in the standings now because William Carey dropped that game to Faulkner. UT Southern still has William Carey left on their schedule. So if they beat them, William Carey might be dropping on that 3rd seed, and now UT Southern's the number 2 seed in the conference in the Southern States. Keep an eye on that. You also got Columbia over the AMC. They're 11 or 12 game winning streak, I believe. Indiana Tech 11 games. Mid-American Nazarene, Benedictine at 10, and then Georgia Gwinnett is also at 10. If the schedule is right, the reason I want to say Georgia Gwinnett and throw them in there is because they will finish as the number 1 seed in the CAC. They are done with their conference play. It ends, I believe, this weekend. And GGC will be the number 1 seed in that tournament. I believe GGC is going to win the CAC. I don't think anybody is going to even get close to them. I think that they have been on an absolute tear all year for a first-year program. You can't get any better than what the Grizz have done. So we want to give them props. And again, I do believe they will be the CAC conference tournament champions. Last note I wanted to give before we head into the weekend, some great games here. Rio Grande, 14-game winning streak. They clinched the East Division last night. If they win tomorrow, they will get the auto bid for the River States yet again. Again, Rio Grande, I've talked to a few people that thought that Rio Grande would not be where they are. I was not one of them. I wasn't. I knew what was going to happen. I understand, new team, all this stuff. It don't matter. This is Rio Grande we're talking about. And the River States has been very, very competitive. I love seeing Midway, Brescia. I love seeing Shawnee State. They're going to have... It's kind of another episode coming up here. Spoiler alert. I'm going to do an episode probably in 2 episodes now, so maybe next Friday, where we look at how many at-large bids will each conference get. I think it'll be a fun little activity, a fun little experiment for me, so I'm looking forward to that one. Might even push it back another week, depending on, because obviously some of this is going to matter, is going to be conference championships. Who wins them? Are we going to have some bid stealers, some Cinderella runs? We'll see. But something to keep an eye on in the near future. But yeah, Rio Grande, congratulations to you all. East Division champions and 1 win away from clinching the River States for yet another time. That's going to do it for the 50th episode. Really appreciate y'all. We've been doing this for 50 episodes now. We're going to get closer and closer to that 100 mark very soon. We are now closer to our subscriber count as well. 1 away from 60, trying to get to 100 before the start of the postseason of the national tournament, I should say. So trying to get there. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to help us get to that total. But we will catch y'all in the next one Monday morning. Peace.